This is the Get a Life podcast. Ex-cult conversations.
Coming up in today's podcast, we're going to go over the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church global estimated in Australian dollars. 2,500 to 3,000 Brethren member companies' estimated global sales is 7 to 10 billion annually. We're going to cover the UBT $500 million sales, Campus & Co. $200 million sales, Vision Fund $40 million is just the investment by the Grace Trust in the UK. OneSchool Global $200 million cost to run annually, some of it is covered by the government grants. And the Rapid Relief Team $5 million cost to run annually. The estimate is that the assets and wealth of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church community globally is at least $30 billion. Under ecosystem, we're going to cover how the Brethren companies use UBT, donate to RRT, sell goods and services to education trusts, OneSchool Global, Campus & Co., and Gospel Trust. Brethren members pay OneSchool Global, purchase from UBT, Campus & Co., volunteer for Rapid Relief Team, donate to Grace Trust, Rapid Relief Team, Education and Meeting Trust. And we'll go through how the charities move money between them. The Universal Business Team, UBT, Grace Trust, Educational Trust, Campus & Co., Meeting Rooms, and the National Assistance Fund, NAF. In COVID government contracts, they were worth over $6 billion to the Brethren globally. This doesn't include private sector contracts, example McDonald's. It has created an issue for the Brethren. The spend on private property, meeting rooms, Campus & Co. stores are very difficult to hide. Sydney properties bought by the Hales, Gavin Grace, etc. In the UK, Anthony Hazel, Sebastian Parsons, the Robertsons, all spending $5 million to $10 million on personal properties. A simple search of UK Plymouth Brethren on Google News shows nothing but planning applications for new meeting rooms and new shops. This wealth and the spending of this wealth puts Hales Brethren in the spotlight. We are not surprised that the ATO are finally investigating. The raid would suggest that the movement of funds between all the different parts of the global ecosystem is at risk. Breaking news. We have new info on the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church and new details on the ATO raid in Sydney. The ATO team arrived unannounced with a 36-page search warrant. The PBCC ecosystem is estimated to be worth 30 billion assets. The ATO padlocked and chained filing cabinets in UBT so they could be seized. The ATO left federal police to guard UBT so nobody could return unattended. UBT offers a business consulting services that are $10,000 to $150,000 per session. When the Hales present at the business seminars, they're paid $100,000 to $150,000 per speech. Approximately 25 ATO officers were at their UBT precinct, and a further 100 officers raided 12 other locations across Australia. Locations raided included the home and business of Rapid Relief Team's Managing Director Ron Arkcoll. Rick Grosse, Chief Financial Officer of OneSchool Global, was interrogated by the ATO and his phone was confiscated. As you listen to this podcast, we want to ask you, does this sound like a regular audit, like the PBCC are claiming? And make sure to stay tuned to the end of this podcast for a never-before-seen photo from a recent fellowship meeting Bruce was at. Note, this is not the one that was published in the Sydney Morning Herald. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Get a Life podcast, Ex-Cult Conversations. I am here today with Richard Marsh, Damian Hastie, Abby Thompson, an anonymous and an insider. I am Cheryl Hope. I am a ex-member of the Exclusive Brethren, now known as the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church from Maple Creek, Saskatchewan. And I am going to let Richard and Abby do a brief introduction of who they are and where they're from. And then we are going to dive into a podcast that everybody is waiting for on the ATO raids that happened this past week in Australia. So go ahead, Richard and Abby, just introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Richard Marsh. I'm a former member of the Plymouth Brethren. When I was in the Brethren, I I was raised and grew up in Cambridge, UK, but also spent 10 years living in the Brethren community in Regina in Saskatchewan.
Hi, I'm Abby. I am local in Coventry, UK. I was married in the PBCC in Coventry, UK. I left in September 2022. Brief bit about me.
And Damian, are you able to give just a brief introduction of yourself, how you came into this picture, and also let everyone know your website where they can find all the information that we're going to be talking about today?
Thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, I'm Damian Hastie. I run the Open and Candid investigative journalism website. I got involved with really understanding the Brethren back in 2020 when some of the COVID contracts were awarded. I'm from there over the last 4 years, probably with the help of many ex-members, got to fully understand just what the Brethren is about. And that's it, really. I'm based in the UK.
As many of you know that have been following social media, that the Australian Tax Office, ATO, raided the precinct in Sydney, Australia. And we're going to go through the article that Michael Batchelard from the Sydney Morning Herald put out. And we are going to cover some of the things that weren't put in there and also dive into more in depth with what was put into this article. The article is, the headline is Inside the Ecosystem, the Brethren Businesses and the Sites of the Tax Office. The politically connected sect known as the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church preaches a hatred for the world. Women are treated as second-class citizens and homosexuality is not tolerated. The Australian Tax Office conducted an extraordinary unannounced raid this week on the global headquarters of businesses run by the conservative Christian sect, the Exclusive Brethren, searching for evidence of misuse of funds by high net worth individuals in the church. Global leader and Sydney-based man of God, Bruce D. Hales, had traveled overseas at the time of the raid, but former members of his flock believe he has returned to hold meetings this weekend. So we were blessed with this picture that is like the first picture that Bruce Hales has been seen public in for quite some time. And this is him taking a preaching earlier in Westfield. And for those of you asking, he's not standing. He is sitting on his throne. He sits on a little cushion. He's got armrests. So for everybody that's been emailing and asking me, like, is he standing? No, he's not standing. He's sitting.
Started off with 3-day meetings, Bible readings, so-called, in Westfield, which is basically a suburb of New York in the USA. And then he went on to, now those Westfield meetings, they totally overfilled the hall, and the fire marshal had to come and empty people out from the aisles for safety reasons. That's another whole story, of course. And when the fire marshal left, they put everyone back in again.
They didn't put everybody back in. They did like half a row. Right. And then on Sunday, Rick Markham went down to the center dish and took pictures showing the aisles cleared. And then they went and filled them up. So we know that they had to have a meeting with the fire marshal on the Monday. And I'm assuming, we're speculating here, that those pictures were taken for them to show that, no, it was all fine. But and indeed, after the pictures were taken, they were filled up back to max capacity. So for any of you that watch these podcasts and know that there's Brethren buildings or Brethren meeting halls being built in your area, yeah, they can be very sneaky with how they can bypass these regulations.
Very relevant. So from Westfield, he then flew to Barbados, where there's a Brethren congregation of about 500, where we understand he was supposed to be taking Bible readings, but claimed to be too tired and never did so. But he withdrew from, excommunicated a considerable number of Barbados Brethren, including the leadership, the local leadership, and told the congregation there that they had come very close to losing their franchise. So yeah, his trip was he went from Sydney to Westfield in New Jersey, from Westfield to Barbados, Barbados back to Greenwich, Connecticut, where he was borrowed a luxury mansion from a member of the Brethren. From there to Kalispell, Montana, where there's a very small Brethren congregation. And as far as we know, Kalispell, Los Angeles, and back to Sydney.
Went to San Francisco on his way home.
So he spent, Anonymous is saying, 3 days in Kalispell, flew out to Kalispell to Greenwich, and then San Fran on his way home. That's what I thought. Yeah.
So this is the picture of him in the Westfield Gospel Hall, which would be built for a capacity, sort of fixed seating capacity for about 1,000 or 1,500 maximum people, and they would have crammed about 3,000 brethren into it. So this is just
it was confirmed. Someone confirmed it that it was 3,300 people that were packed in there.
Wow. I mean, that's really...
Yeah, but look at them. They're literally sardines in a can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, John Hales said 4 square feet per person, so you can work it out. So yeah, this is just a zoomed in of the center of the room, and it's just this vast sea of white shirts disappearing into the distance. And yeah, here he is sitting in his...
So our insider says it shows Dean 2 along on his left.
Yeah.
So right here would be...
Oh, that's Dean. Okay.
Yeah.
Dean Hales.
He hasn't got his glasses on.
Yeah. So that's his second son, Dean.
So following on into the article, it says Hales, who travels the world in a 20,000 per hour private jet, tells his flock to charge the highest price to the worldly people, including governments and other businesses. In a doctrine known as spoiling the Egyptian, in 2002, he preached, "The world is there for our using up of it. The world is there to take what we want from it and leave everything we don't want. Spoil the Egyptians as quick and as fast as you can." And this is a photograph of the ATO officers entering number 10 Herb Elliott Drive, the headquarters of businesses related to the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church in Olympic Park on Tuesday. Starting on Tuesday, Australian Tax Office officials swept into an address in the precinct in Herb Elliott Avenue in the Sydney suburb of Olympic Park and raided the head offices of a number of Brethren-run companies and its school system, OneSchool Global. Investigators confiscated documents, computers, phones, and other material. So we're just going to stop there for a second because we have some other... It wasn't just the precinct that was raided. There was a lot of other places that were raided too. Ron Arkcoll, who is also the head of RRT, his business was raided and also his home. And I think there was there 12 other businesses that were raided?
Yes, 12 other businesses.
Yeah. So they went in. I'm going to show you the document. They went in with this document, ATO authorization to search. So this is pretty much a document that allows them to go in with no prior notice and get what they need.
The most significant thing about that document is the first line. And this has to go before a judge, I imagine, to sign off on it. And the recommendation is that you approve taking a formal approach by exercising access powers under section blah, blah, blah of the Tax Administration Act at the premises listed in Annexure C and who have been identified as participating in activities involving concealing of information from the commissioner. So this is not, as the brethren want to make out, a routine audit. This is specifically because the tax office has reason to believe that information is being concealed from them.
It goes on to say, as senior staff members of the Brethren's parent company, Universal Business Team, or UBT, downplayed the raid in a note to staff as the organization working with the ATO to support with a regular audit. But ATO documentation confirms it conducts access without prior notice raids only in exceptional circumstances, including suspected tax evasion, fraud, secrecy, or concealment, and where we have reasonable belief that documents may be disposed of, altered, or destroyed. So this is the email that went out to all the staff, as in this precinct was 15 to 25 ATO officers that were in there conducting this. So this is what UBT sent out. Hello, for your awareness, we're currently working with the Australian Tax Office to support with a regular audit. There will be a number of officers on site at the precinct periodically over the next few days. Don't be alarmed. We would just like to make you aware of what is happening. If you are approached or requested for any information, Michelle will be your point of contact. Thank you for your cooperation. Regards, General Management Team, UBT Australia. So, I just have no words.
They're such liars. I mean, this is them. They don't just lie to people outside the organization. They lie to their own people.
Don't be alarmed. It's like they're just trying to hush everyone, basically, and keep their dummies in. But I think once they've read that article, and, well, I hope that once they've read the article and perhaps watched this podcast, that they realise that it's a lot more than what they're being told. And hopefully that will encourage people to speak to the authorities.
We need to unpack for the insiders who are going to be told a different narrative. How can we show you that this wasn't a regular audit?
Well, to start with, if it was a regular audit, how come there was a simultaneous raid on 12 other premises at the same time, including the home of the director of the Rapid Relief Team? I mean, does that sound like a regular audit?
Also, they don't wear ATO vests if it's just a regular audit. So, yeah, wake up to reality, people.
Yeah. And we know from that, Rick Grosse had his phone seized, and he is the chief financial officer of OSG. So you have to understand that
OneSchool Global, OSG, he's the chief financial officer of OneSchool Global, which is the Brethren's global school system for educating all of their children.
Yeah, ATO. So Anonymous says ATO is required to wear the vest to any raid, not an audit.
The other thing that you've got is that if it was a regular audit, you would notify your staff a number of days, if not weeks, in advance. The fact that this was sent out at 10:40 a.m. on the morning of the raid on Tuesday, 19th of March, with "Don't be alarmed," just basically backs up that this was an unannounced visit by the ATO.
Mm.
Yeah.
And since, from what I've heard, the place is basically being cleared out of staff, and there's more ATO members there than there are UBT staff. So they're clearly trying to keep it all covered up.
And I mean, to state the obvious, in an ordinary audit, and I've been in businesses when there's an audit and some completely anonymous looking person in normal business dress will come in and they will spend an hour or two looking through your accounts. In a regular audit, they don't seize and take away people's personal phones and their computers and lock their filing cabinets. I mean, this is the most egregious lie that is being spread around in a desperate attempt to cover up what's really happening.
Yeah, I mean, one of the girls told me that she had her phone taken away, and a group of them that she was part of had them taken away in the lunch hall.
Wow.
So.
And we also know that on the 6th floor, ATO padlocked filing cabinets, had federal police placed there to guard them in the office before they were taken out. Like, these kinds of things don't happen in a regular audit. So, I mean, I just hope some of you can take those beautiful rose-colored glasses that you're wearing off and realize that there's been enough voices come forward with what we know is happening inside there for it to be taken this serious. People don't just do a raid like this without having sufficient evidence of what we've all been speaking about for how many months.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Article goes to continue saying, This masthead has also learned that businesses in Goulburn, whose owners run the Brethren's public-facing charity, the Rapid Relief Team, were also raided by the tax office on Tuesday. Church spokesman and Melbourne businessman Lloyd Grimshaw said the church does not operate any businesses or occupy offices at the location where the ATO has visited, but added there were a lot of members of our church, including senior members, who work really hard to build profitable businesses. So, okay, let's dive into more about Lloyd Grimshaw. What is interesting is that sometimes the church spokesman Grimshaw uses his first name rather than his known name, middle name, which is Merrick Lloyd Grimshaw. What also is a little odd is that Merrick Lloyd Grimshaw is also a director of the Rapid Relief Team, as what's shown here. What is then even odder is that the last annual Rapid Relief Team accounts logged with the Australian government website for charities show that the address for the Rapid Relief Team is the Precinct, Herb Elliott Way, Sydney, which is shown here at the bottom of the financial statement. Then, finally, the killer on the formation of the Rapid Relief Team, a governing document was also logged on the Australian government website for charities. There is only one member of the Rapid Relief Team, and that is the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. We've attached a copy for the RRT governing document, which on page 35 shows just one member. It is also clear that the PBCC services also operate out of the precinct and are funded by a loan by the church. And that you see right here is the loan, $100,000. The Constitution of the Rapid Relief Handbook will be added into the description of this podcast. And if you go to page 35, you will see the image that I showed earlier about the PBCC being the only member. So it's quite clear that the church spokesman Grimshaw was lying. The RRT has only one member, thus it does operate a business where ATO raid carried out. It is also clear that the PBC services, Pty Limited, runs many Brethren services with the same contact email and telephone number, often being the telephone for UBT accountants, and PBC services was set up with a loan of $100K from the church. It'd be very hard to say that this is not linked to the Plymouth Brethren Church. It's also run out of the precinct. You see here, it says Sydney Olympic Park, Sydney Olympic Park. And then I just want to take you to this picture. We've got a picture of Lloyd Grimshaw, the spokesperson for the PBCC. Here he is on the left. Ron Arkcoll, managing director of RRT, whose home and business was raided, with the MP, Angus Taylor. I want to pause this here, and I want to dive into some of the work Damian has done within the PBCC. So I don't know if you want to take this from here, Damian, and just dive into some of the stuff that...
Perhaps you could start, Damian, by telling us who does operate from the locations that the ATO has visited, and telling us whether or not they are run by the church.
Yeah, I think if you look at what is the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, what is the church element, it's how they can distinguish it between the church, UBT, RRT. It's almost as if there's a positive story around the RRT, that's the church. If there is a negative story around RRT, they are not connected. So this whole line between the church and the business is blurred when they want it to be blurred, and totally separate when they want it to be totally separate. So to me, if you actually look at where the ATO have carried out their raid, you look at the businesses in the precinct in Sydney. I also find it interesting, by the way, that the business in Warwick in the UK is also called the precinct. So with virtually the same businesses operating out of it. So within the Sydney precinct, you've got obviously UBT, the Universal Business Team. How you could ever say that is not linked to the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, I'm unsure. Within that, you've also got the Vision Foundation, works out of there. So the Vision Foundation is actually the investment arm of arguably the PBCC rather than UBT. So this is at the centre of the ecosystem that raises funds through investment. So you've got UBT, you've got Vision Foundation, you've then got all the Brethren schools, which, according to Lloyd Grimshaw, are now nothing to do with the church. So I'm struggling with that one somewhat. So OneSchool Global operate out of the precinct. Then you've got the Rapid Relief Team at Goulburn. The addresses of the Rapid Relief Team are interesting because they do sometimes try and separate it from the main businesses. But any search of the internet or on Google will show you that Rapid Relief Team are linked to the precinct in Sydney. As well as that, you've got Campus & Co. So all the Brethren shops. So we've got the schools, the shops, the business central buying group, where all the IT for Brethren members is bought from. You've got Rapid Relief Team, and it's not linked to the church in any way whatsoever.
I mean, the language is interesting. I mean, if they'd said the church does not own any businesses, that might have been true in some extent, in that probably the PBCC might not literally be the owner. But what he actually says is the church does not operate any business. But I mean, the church absolutely does operate these businesses. I mean, it's unquestionable.
Occupy it.
The top people in the church are the people who are operating these businesses. It's the same identical people. I mean, this is just an extraordinary. This is Hitler's big lie theory put into practice. In that it's such a huge lie that some members of the public will probably swallow it. So they lie. As I say, they lie to their own people and say it's just a regular audit. And then they lie to the press with this completely egregious lie where they claim, wasn't me, Gov, nothing to do with me. I mean, they literally got blood all over their hands and they're saying, nothing to do with me. We don't own these businesses.
I would argue, do the PBC own UBT, or does UBT own the church?
That is a really, really good. That's a very good way of putting it. Yeah.
So, for me, you look at the size of these businesses as well. So, if you look at research I've done for Open and Candid shows that there's probably between 2,500 and 3,000 businesses, companies, whatever you want to call them, run by Brethren members across the globe. And within them, they've got sales of 7 to 10 billion Aussie dollars annually. And then within that, you've got UBT. So UBT operating out of the precinct in Sydney with 500 million of Aussie dollar sales each year. You've got Campus & Co, which must have circa $200 million of sales. You've got the Vision Fund that I mentioned. Just one little bit I did on the Vision Fund. The Grace Trust in the UK have invested 40 million Aussie dollars in the Vision Investment Fund. So that's just one little entity of the overall Brethren. So I suspect that the Vision Fund is worth probably a few $100 million. Then you've got OneSchool Global, which is a $200 million operation globally. And then you've got Rapid Relief Team, PR side, which, to be fair, in financial terms is relatively small, with only costing 5 million Aussie dollars globally to run each year. But if you look at this is when the people that are inside the Brethren currently, it's not linked to the church, this, according to Lloyd Grimshaw. Yet every day you will deal with UBT, you will buy your shopping at Campus & Co, you will have heard of the investment with Vision Fund. Your kids, your grandkids will go to OneSchool Global. You will volunteer for the Rapid Relief Team. Yeah, it's not linked. None of this is linked to the church.
Not only that, in their recruitment advertisements, UBT specifically says, and I'm quoting this verbatim, UBT, which is owned by the PBCC. That's what it actually says in all their recruitment advertisements. And they also say that all of our clients, are businesses owned by members of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church.
Yeah, so both of these are images from job recruitment sites, and it both says UBT, which is owned by the PBCC.
And of course, we also know that every single OneSchool Global student is a member of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, and every single volunteer at RRT is a member of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. So it's really hard. If this isn't a church organization, who does it belong to? Who is running it?
I mean, do people like Lloyd actually think about what they're saying before they say it?
No, because he's just got to concoct something up to, put a dome around that fire that's burning in the moment.
He's not even spinning it. He's just completely lying outright and flatly denying it.
And yet these people are,
yeah,
so Christian, and they go from the Bible. I'm sure someone other than me could quote 100 scriptures about people that lie.
Yeah, something about thou shalt not bear false witness, which is in the 10 Commandments, which is fairly fundamental piece of Christian doctrine.
Yeah, and isn't do not defraud as well?
Well,
that's all about fraud, isn't it?
Included. I don't think it says anything about tax except about some tax gatherers, but we know the brethren don't like tax collectors.
There's also a number of private businesses that also use the precinct as their head office address. So it isn't just the church, schools, shops, charities. It is also a number of individual businesses are linked
as in
to that
still
address.
PBCC ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have Anonymous just sent us a message. Campus & Co. recently in the UK had a coffee morning to fundraise for OneSchool, which raised a mere $1.9 million. Is that for the school, church, or who? Damian, what do you estimate that the assets and wealth of the PBCC community is?
My estimate is that annually, it is, not annually, the assets and the wealth are, my estimate is 30 billion Australian dollars. That's 30 billion Australian dollars. And that's based on the assets of the Brethren members' companies, the fact that they will all own properties, and just the value of their the educational trusts in each area, the gospel trusts in each area, and the overall charities. When you look at that, it is probably, I think, a safe estimate, conservative estimate, is that they are worth at least 30 billion Australian dollars.
For 55,000 members.
Yeah, works out about 500,000 each.
And then they wonder why they're being audited.
Yeah. I think for me, one of the key things, if you look as a non-community member, I look at, there's businesses in the UK that work in the coffee market. So they will supply coffee machines to coffee shops, and they will also supply the coffee. So if I look that I'm a non-Brethren community member and I go in that coffee shop, local coffee shop, nothing to do with the Brethren, run by non-community members, absolutely nothing, no links at all. I purchase the coffee. Some of that money is going back into the Brethren ecosystem. And within that, I could spend, say I spent 20 Aussie dollars in that coffee shop. That $20 could touch UBT, the Brethren member company involved, It could touch other Brethren member companies. Some of that $20 could go into education trusts. It could go to OneSchool Global. It could go into Campus & Co. It could go into the Gospel Trusts. So all this money within the ecosystem is moving around immensely, to the point I'm not surprised at all that the ATO have done this raid, because I regularly find holes in the accounts across. So a great example of that would be within the UK, UBT donated 8 million Aussie dollars to the National Assistance Fund. So UBT gave NAF $8 million. If I go into the National Assistance Fund's accounts, which is a charity, so their accounts are filed on the Charity Commission within the UK. They have to file by law them accounts. So when I go into them accounts, I can see that $8 million, I can see it. However, when I go into UBT accounts for the same time period, there's no visibility of that. Absolutely none. So unless, to me, that is a charitable gift, it's a donation, it's given, it's not separated. UBT accounts show what they have given to the Grace Trust, but there is no mention anywhere in the UBT accounts for the same time period that they gave $8 million to a charity, to another charity. So to me, these holes are everywhere. I can see them between the Vision Fund and some of the investments that they've made linked to the Rapid Relief Team. The ecosystem is so complex. The movement of money around that ecosystem, they could actually be making honest mistakes. But at the same time, that setup is to ensure that there is very little visibility, and it is very difficult for any tax office in any country to really examine and understand where that issue is.
Wow.
So, if any one of those entities got audited, they could probably make their books balance. But if you audited all of them as a whole, you would expect to find that there is actually a huge difference between the amount of money going in and the amount of money that they can account for going out. Because within that ecosystem, they can shuffle the money around to make any one organization's books balance. If they've got a little heads up, a little advance warning, they can shovel some money from some other organization to fill the deficiencies in their budget. But if you regard the whole PBCC ecosystem as a black box that issues $1 billion worth of charitable receipts, they would have to prove that those receipts have been translated into $1 billion worth of charitable expenditure. And the great question is, can they prove that? Or is the sum total output rather less than the input? And if so, where has that extra money gone to? Is that a kind of an overall how you see it?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair summary. It is, if you look at an individual set of accounts, i.e., as I said, the UBT accounts in the UK, they look like a proper set of accounts and everything looks as in place. But as you say, it's as you move to the next bit, so what follow that trail of that money, that's when the holes start to appear.
Yeah.
Now, it is only through that knowledge that you would then go and look at them accounts. And this is, to me, this isn't just with the Brethren sort of UBTs, OneSchool Globals and the Gospel Trusts and the charities. This is within their businesses as well. So if you look to a non-community member who is the buying officer for a large public sector group or hospital, when they put up a contract for tender, there may be 10 companies that tender for that contract. Quite often, in areas where Brethren members are strong, you will see that maybe 5 of them companies out of the 10 are actually Brethren companies owned by Brethren members. But if you're that non-community buying manager looking at it, there are 5 companies in different parts of the UK. There's no connection between the 5. Yet everything that I've looked at on Open and Candid suggests that actually them 5 businesses will all work via UBT. They will all know each other. Quite often they'll be related as well. And actually, when you start looking at it, it is that they're using their size to complicate and confuse.
And so also in that situation, a hospital may think it's getting competitive bids on a project, and in fact all the bids are coming from Brethren companies who are in every likelihood cooperating behind the scenes, which I presume is actually illegal in some sense, or could be illegal. And they're really just getting a quote from the PBCC, although they can show on paper that they've put it out for competitive tender. And then of course they can fix the price and divvy up the profits between them. Not saying that actually happened, of course, but I mean, there's huge potential for a cartel operation where you've got lots of businesses in the same market who are really all basically operated by the same leadership.
At Open and Candid, we have been approached probably, I'd say in the region between 15 and 20 times by non-Brethren businesses that are operating in that same field as Brethren companies, with stories around some of the issues that they face when competing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was going to insert here what Anonymous said. They are worth $30 billion, but we've had reports of their members using food banks. How does that add up?
Yeah.
When you look at who UBT have so they have like expeditions or expos where businesses related to the PBCC and within the PBCC can go, anyone can go. And they had key speakers from the Bank of England. That's the level of power that they have, because who could get a speaker from the Bank of England to just turn up? No one.
Yes. Yeah, so they have these like a business exhibition, like like a business expo for a particular area of trade. So if it's like medical equipment suppliers, for example, they will get in a bunch of Brethren businesses and they will try and attract a whole bunch of potential purchasers to come along, and then they'll have keynote speakers and like a whole business conference all around it as a sales effort.
In 2023, so nearly a year ago, the keynote speech from the Bank of England was about the state of the economy.
Okay, should we dive into the COVID contracts?
Okay, I think one of the issues that the Brethren have faced, the leadership, the Hales faced, is though the COVID contracts were fantastic for them as a money-making operation, my calculation is that they won over 6 billion Aussie dollars globally of COVID contracts, and that's just in the public sector. Doesn't include any private contracts with some of the biggest names, e.g. McDonald's buying PPE from Brethren companies. So 6 billion excluding private contracts. It becomes really difficult to hide that kind of profit, that kind of turnover and profit. And what do you do with it? What do you do with all that profit that came from it? We've seen, obviously within Sydney, the number of purchases made by Hales and Gavin Grace on properties in 10, 15 million Aussie dollars. So you're looking at the size of that. It isn't any different in the UK. It's just that it's probably not been reported because it's not the Hales that are buying. But if you look at some of the purchases of property that have gone on since the contracts, the likes of Anthony Hazel, Lee Hazel, Sebastian Parsons, and the Robertson brothers, have all been spending between 5 million and 10 million Aussie dollars on personal properties. So you can see there where some of that money is going, but a lot of the money will end up through the Gospel Trust or the Education Trust or through UBT going into the ecosystem. And there is so much wealth driven by the COVID contracts. It's almost as if probably an annual turnover was doubled over the 2020-2021 period of the total Brethren. So that kind of bit, the kind of spend that's going on currently, I can understand again why a tax office would be looking at that, because it's very difficult to follow where some of that money has gone.
Yeah.
And is there a feeling that by using the various charitable entities that are included in the ecosystem, this money can be, they can avoid taxation on this money? Because, I mean, taxation would be huge on profits of that nature. And so do we see large sums of money accumulating in Brethren charitable trusts?
There is some evidence of that. I generally don't believe there's any obvious and clear individuals or Brethren member companies not paying tax as they should do. So I'm not questioning their whether it's legal or illegal. We do see, if you go in and look at a Unispace or a Zanti Global or a Medco Solutions, you will see tax that has been paid to the UK, to the Australian government. One of the things that you do see, though, within there is some really strange transactions. So, for example, when we've done the research into the COVID contracts that were won by Brethren member companies, circa 85% of the total value of that $6 billion was linked to companies that were owned by the Hales.
Wow.
So whether that be Charles, Gareth, Dean, or companies linked to the Hales family. So within there, you also see some other strange things. So I'll use probably the biggest winners of COVID contracts, Brethren companies globally. It actually was a company, Medco Solutions Limited, which is owned by the Robertson brothers from Didcot. So they won contracts to supply both PPE with the UK government, and they also won massive contracts to supply the lateral flow tests or the RAT tests, whatever you want to call them, as similar things. So they won contracts worth circa 2 billion Aussie dollars. So if you think about it, probably a third of the total value went to this one company, which interestingly, Medco Solutions in Australia and Medco Solutions Inc. in the US is actually owned lock, stock and barrel by Dean Hales. And he doesn't own the UK version. However, when you go into the UK version of Medco Solutions and look at their accounts, over the 2 years where they reported all the COVID contracts, what you can see is there's a related party transfer. So basically, they spent money with a company that was related to Medco Solutions in some way or to the Robertsons. That value is 300 million Aussie dollars. So, yes, they may have made some profit out of the COVID contracts, probably circa 20, 30 million each. And they've bought properties with that, and they've reported that all correctly, as far as I can see on their accounts. But actually, where did this 300 million of Aussie dollars go? What was that other company involved? And we see this across all COVID contracts, not just Brethren ones, where there's been a middleman, somebody else involved, and try to identify that becomes very difficult. And I am aware also that within that 300 million could be to another Hales-owned company.
And could it potentially be to a company located in a tax haven, so to speak? So
Yes.
Guernsey or Jersey, like where the one of their charity, what's the charity that's registered there? Is it?
So, but in Jersey, so just so people are aware, Jersey's just off between the UK and France, just into the Atlantic, and it is an offshore haven. So where the tax payments there are very, very small, and businesses can benefit by setting up a company there. So what the Brethren have done, they set up in the UK, as I talked about earlier, the Vision Investment Fund. So what the Vision Investment Fund does is invest all this additional money that's sat in charities such as the Grace Trust and is Brethren owned to try and make more money. So the Vision Investment Fund partnered with a Jersey-based offshore management company that would manage that fund. So that fund is based in Jersey and managed. What I suspect from there that the company they are using in Jersey, they specialise in property. So what it would suggest to me is if you are making gains on property, so for example, if a gospel trust was buying a new meeting room, or they were getting a venue, or Campus & Co were getting a new building to create a new shop. If that was done via the Vision Investment Management Fund in Jersey, if when they would come to sell that, any gains on that property, they wouldn't be liable for any tax.
Wow.
Now, if you actually go in and just do basic searches of Google, you put Plymouth Brethren planning, Plymouth Brethren UK, and look at the news articles rather than just the search articles on Google, what you will find is it is just full of gospel trusts, education trusts, planning permission for new shops, new meeting rooms, all over. The UK is particularly bad at the moment. You see it everywhere, and I suspect that is coming out of the profits of some of these COVID contracts.
Wow.
With all that new construction, we see what happened in Auckland, where a whole load of Brethren funded construction around the school, the contracts went at exorbitant high profits, 300% profit rates, to Hales owned construction and architectural companies. So potentially on all that new build that's going ahead in the UK, it may well be Hales, effectively Hales owned companies that get the contracts for that at very profitable rates. So thereby effectively laundering the money right back into the Hales family in Sydney, Australia. Is that a possibility?
It is. If you look at the largest flooring company, Havwoods International, that is owned partly by Dean Hales, and I'd argue that he probably owns the parent company completely through either his own name or one of his other investment companies. So all flooring could be done for the shops, the meeting rooms, the schools, all that flooring, whether that be wood, carpeting, tiles, all that money could be going straight back to the Dean Hales. There's one example. We obviously, from Steve Simmons' podcast, you could see that that's what happened in Auckland. I think one of the weaknesses that the Hales have is that they do like to tell. Their websites will quite often tell you that they've done the work. So,
Yes.
the opportunity for the money to go back to Hale's own business has always been there, and I'm absolutely certain it happens because they admit it happens. Whether it happens every single time, that'd be very difficult to prove.
Because we had this very interesting report from the UK that their what do they call the trust that looks after the gospel halls, that looks after their meeting room construction? Their representatives of that trust were visiting congregations in the UK saying, "Oh, Bruce Hales wants all the wood paneling in your meeting halls and all the carpets to be identical all around the globe. So never mind your carpet and wood paneling is in perfect condition. Rip it all out and replace it with new paneling and new carpets." Now, my guess is that Havwoods would be excellently positioned to supply the wooden paneling and the carpets for the Brethren's meeting halls. Is that stretching it too far?
No. I mean, that's to me the obvious way of funding if you want the profits to go in. And I'll be quite open. My view of the Brethren and the Hales, how they operate, is, to me, it appears very much like or similar to a Ponzi scheme in the fact that everybody invests at the bottom, the people at the top make all the money. I think the only difference is between how the Brethren operate, their Ponzi scheme, in inverted brackets, is that the people at the bottom that are investing will never, ever get that back.
In a conventional Ponzi scheme, the investors at the bottom are expecting a big return on their investment. But the amazing thing about the Brethren system is the people at the bottom aren't even expecting a return because they're giving in the belief that their donations are helping the church and helping the school.
And that's how this whole system gets to work the way it gets to work, is because we can sit here and pump out this information, but it's getting through the belief that is so indoctrinated and brainwashed into them that says, we are doing this for the good of all. We're doing this for the benefit of this. We're doing it for the benefit of this. Anonymous wrote in, the medium oak colored paneling is much too angry for our young people. That's what was said.
Apparently what Bruce Hales said. So Damian, the ordinary grassroots brethren are constantly bombarded by the message that the school, the education system desperately needs money. It's all going to fall to pieces unless we have a lot of cash and we have it quick. What would you say to people, ordinary, decent brethren, as to whether or not OneSchool Global is in crying need of funds?
I think the obvious thing you would state is if you were in Australia, OneSchool Global, how many buildings could you have built? How much could you have funded teachers instead of buying free, the Hales buying free multi-million-dollar properties? Or if you're in the UK and you look at between Anthony Hazel, Lee Hazel, the Robertsons, Sebastian Parsons, Ralph Green, if you look at what they have spent out of the contracts, that would probably fund OneSchool Global, just on what they've spent on properties, would fund OneSchool Global for 12 months.
Wow.
So 5 people, that school could have been funded for 12 months. And it's the same across the globe. You've got the elite members, the Hales acolytes are just making the money. And you're paying for it. If you're in the Brethren, you're at the bottom, you're paying for the school, you're supporting the shop, you're volunteering your time freely, you're supporting the rapid relief team, where the elite occasionally come in and look like they're making a huge donation, but it'd be a tiny amount of what they earn.
Yeah. That's a powerful, powerful, powerful statement that you've just made. And I really hope that if there's one place to rewind this podcast would be right here and re-listen to what Damian just said again.
So just 2 or 3 of the wealthiest members of the PBCC could quite happily fund the whole of OneSchool Global without anyone else putting $1 into it. And their wealth is essentially derived from exploiting the brethren.
It just breaks my heart. It makes me want to cry. I have to pull my emotions out of it and be like, they have to start seeing through this. And I'm hoping that this article that Michael Batchelor put out really starts getting those people who are about to put one foot in and one foot out. I mean, we've got so many people with one foot in, one foot out, just waiting to leave. But I'm hoping that this whole Australian Tax Office raid, those people that are listening in or listening to podcasts, don't quite know what to think about it, start really putting that one other foot on the other side and being like, yeah, this is absolutely ridiculous. I am in 100% a cult cartel that just breeds money. It does not breed faith and Christianity.
I mean, at the very least, even if you're not in a position to leave, quit putting money into the Brethren ecosystem. Put it in the bank, put it somewhere safe, make sure the Brethren have no claim on it. It's not in some joint account or in some business account. Put it away, because when this all comes down, you're going to need it. And the Brethren, the PBCC, they do not need your money. Keep it. You've earned it.
None of us are claiming that the actual PBCC cult, because that's what it is right now, is going to come down. But what needs to come down and what needs to be exposed, what needs to be cleaned up is the financial fraud that's going on in there. And so I've said this before. I've had a lot of people reach out to me lately of people working for them. If you have an opportunity to leave a Brethren business that you're working for, take that opportunity. Absolutely take that opportunity. If you are feeding into the ecosystem with your money, like Richard said, tuck that away, because things are going to get chaotic. Things are going to get messy. This is not the first step of this. This is going to keep happening. This is going to keep unrolling, all interconnected. Australia is just, you take the core of this and it bleeds out into the United Kingdom. It bleeds out to New Zealand. It bleeds out to North America. It bleeds out to everywhere else. It's not going to just stop here at this raid. It's going to go everywhere because it all is tied in. Okay, so if you go further on into this article, we were just talking about Lloyd Grimshaw. I just want to go into here what he says about, he did not answer a question about whether the church would cooperate with the tax office investigation. A spokesperson for UBT said the company had always sought to abide by the rules set by Australian Taxation Office. And of course, we are cooperating fully with their current information gathering process. So I'll allow everybody to come to their own conclusions on that statement, because we just covered a lot of information that Damian gave us. So this masthead has spoken to 6 former members of the religion who believe the tax office investigation was examining what the church calls its ecosystem, a complex web of interwoven business and tax-free entities, including charities and schools. The source cannot be identified because they fear retribution against their families who are still inside the sect. The My School website shows that between government funding of about 40 million last year, as well as millions in tax-exempt donations from the flock and its attached businesses, each Brethren student's education is funded at between $30,000 and $50,000. However, they are prevented by their religion from going to university, and young Brethren women are destined, after a short stint in family businesses, to be married with children.
Could you comment on that figure, Damian? Because I reckon the real cost of educating a student annually should be way less than $30,000 to $50,000. Do you have a number for that?
I don't know what the average is. What I will point out is there is OneSchool Global There is an anomaly that I've struggled to understand. So if you look at OneSchool Global in the UK and you look at OneSchool Global in Australia, the funding's different, but the actual spend of money is predominantly on the teaching. So
Yes.
in Australia, there is circa 380 staff work for OneSchool Global. In the UK, it's about 540. So there is a difference there. However, so you've probably got a third more pupils, third more staff in the UK compared to Australia. And this is just OneSchool Global. Within that, the average wage of a teacher in Australia is generally about 40% higher than it is in the UK. So what you would expect there is you've got 30% more teachers in the UK than you have, or teaching staff within the UK than you have in Australia. But the Australian ones should be paid 40% better. So across the piece, you'd be probably looking that their spend on teaching by OneSchool Global should be pretty much even between the UK and Australia.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that in the UK, they spend twice as much on teachers than they do in Australia.
Wow.
And it doesn't make any sense.
That's a huge difference.
So when you're looking at the cost there, there's a hole there. I look at that and I look at OneSchool Australia and think, how are you paying your teachers so little? So the actual spend of teaching in Australia looks wrong. If you look at the charities there, you go into the charity status, you can see OneSchool overall, and you can see the individual states, i.e. New South Wales, Victoria. You can see what's been spent. And that number is massively lower than it is in the UK.
In spite of the teachers actually being paid a lot more per person. Yes. Wow.
Wonder if that's why they have an 80% turnover in Australian OSG schools.
Yeah, their staff turnover is notoriously high. Yeah.
Anonymous says the USA government spends an average of $12,912 per student per year.
Yes, and I think the UK government very recently gave figures of about £9,000 as the cost for a state-educated student per year. So these numbers, I mean, a private school is going to be more expensive, but then OneSchool Global has a very limited curriculum, and they also have the advantage of their remote teaching, so they can aggregate classes from all over the globe to a single teacher. So what's £9,000 in Australian dollars? Maybe about 20,000 Australian dollars or less. So these annual expenses, cost of educating students in OneSchool Global, or spend, I should say, of OneSchool Global of between 30 and 50,000 per student, looks like, you know, maybe twice what it should be.
So the other bit that stands out on the OneSchool Global numbers is, and I can't speak for Australia, I can only speak for the UK on the research that we've done here in the UK, is OneSchool Global pay peppercorn rents for their buildings. So if the local Brethren community have an education trust, that educational trust will own the building for OneSchool Global.
Yep.
And OneSchool Global will pay a tiny amount in rent for that property. I'm talking less than $10,000 a year.
Wow.
So you would actually expect the cost of OneSchool Global to be less, not more.
Wow. So, of course, the obvious question is, as OneSchool Global is the main sort of sink and beneficiary of all the Brethren's charitable activities, where is all the money going from? I mean, the difference between what it should cost to educate these students and what it actually does cost to educate these students, and hundreds of millions of dollars a year, need to be accounted
I've got a
for.
suggestion. It could be on uni space, schoolroom fit outs.
Well, it could, Abby, it could. And probably a lot of other things as well. But I mean, this is really getting down to the core of what this whole thing is about, is vast amounts of charitably donated money simply vanishing like a conjuring trick, while mysteriously certain people in positions of very great influence over the church and the school and UBT have seemed to have become incredibly rich and are just spending money left, right, and centre on anything they can spend money on. And of course, we wonder if there may be a connection between these facts.
Okay, going down further to the article. This is on the screen right now is a picture that is of a female who was promoted to housewife. I thought it was quite an interesting picture to put up here because we know, I mean, we've experienced it. We've seen our siblings experience it and all those around us, that's what they have to look forward to. So to those that are saying that, no, they do extra, uni courses and blah, 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 this is their ultimate destination. And what a perfect picture to encapsulate what they all have to look forward to.
I mean, I keep saying this, and I'm going to keep saying it, that even the Taliban in Afghanistan allows at least the boys to go on to university education. And of course, the Taliban is universally condemned for not allowing women to do post-secondary education. But here we have state-funded schools in Australia and Canada, UK, all these Commonwealth countries that forbid any of their students from going to university, and then they happily shell out all these tax advantages and even state funding to these schools. This needs an explanation. Why would the government fund a school, one of whose main purposes is to prevent its students from going to university?
It's interesting for me as well. One of the big stories in the UK in the last week has been around a all-male members club in London called the Garrett Club. Because it's been highlighted that it's an all-male members club in 2024, with a number of high-profile members in government and civil service and lawyers, etc. A number of people have resigned from that club this week because it doesn't fit with the way of the world today, that actually equality should be at the forefront of everything. So a male members club made headline news.
Yeah.
In the UK, the Brethren have got circa 200 charities for schools, gospel trusts, and various other fundraisers. And in that, there's probably between 700 and 1,000 trustees of them 200 charities, of which not one is female.
Wow. No discrimination there, of course. It's just that no females ever applied to the position. So what could they do?
So
No, they know better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So going along in this article, there is reference to Craig Stewart's page here and also Ben Woodbury's TikTok account, ex-cult boy. And it goes into depth about who the PBCC are. I'm not going to dive into all that.
So these are the community ecosystem, as they call it. And this always amuses me they call it an ecosystem, because everyone knows that at the top of the ecosystem, you have a small number of very large predators who actually eat the things lower down the ecosystem, which is probably not what the Brethren are trying to convey when they use that term. So,
or are they?
So it says the Brethren's businesses and tax-free entities believed to be the subject of the tax office investigation. So these are what they are. The first one is UBT Household. So this is a branch of Universal Business Team that actually sells goods and services to the households of the Brethren rather than their businesses. So they supply them the phones and the computers and all manner of just about anything you could imagine you can buy from UBT Household. Then there's Orbit, which is their travel agency. So if you're brethren and you travel, you have to book your flights and everything through Orbit, and they will sell you your tickets. And one suspects they put a hefty markup on those tickets. And you also, and this is, an incredibly Orwellian detail, if you are not going to be in your local congregation for church on any night of the week, you have to inform Orbit where you're going to be. So you're literally tracked. You can't just visit another place, even within your own country, and stay overnight without registering with Orbit and filling in on their spreadsheet where you're going to be.
That was something that Bruce and I really struggled with whilst being inside, because if we wanted to even go and see my mum in Gloucester, then we were meant to let someone know. It's like, no, don't be so pathetic. We can go wherever we want to go.
All of 50 miles away, yeah. I mean,
exactly.
God, they have to know. Yeah. I mean, that's astonishing. But I mean, as well as being an extremely Soviet-style control mechanism, it also makes it also is dealing in millions and millions of dollars worth of brethren travel and air tickets. Then we've got RRT, which is their charity front that actually puts about 2% of their total charity take actually goes into handing out burgers and coffees in, bright red tents to give it's there just for the press. If there's an event that the press is going to turn up at, they will be there with their bright red tents trying to get in front of the cameras. Then, of course, there's OneSchool Global, which has their 9,500 unfortunate children who are trapped in the cult, are all educated there. Then there's UBT itself, which connects with all of their businesses. UBT Accountants does the accounts for virtually all of their businesses.
So the National Assistance Fund is, I know in the UK it was set up almost as the Grace Trust has got too much money. Right. The Grace Trust is sat on 120 million Aussie dollars just in cash in their account. So obviously it's accumulating too much cash. So they've started switching and using the National Assistance Fund. It's funding the same thing. So generally, the National Assistance Fund is now how they channel the money into OneSchool Global in the UK. So previously it came from UBT to Grace Trust to OneSchool Global. Now it's coming to the National Assistance Fund to go to from UBT to the National Assistance Fund and then to OneSchool Global. I generally believe the UBT bit in the UK, they are trying to change. Well, they have. It is no longer owned by the Grace Trust, so it is now a separate, limited, non-profit company.
Wow! So just give me again that number of funds that they had sitting in the Grace Trust.
120 million Aussie dollars.
Wow! Cash. And at the same time, they're pleading and begging with ordinary grassroots brethren everywhere to please give us your small change and the last scrapings of your bank account, because we just desperately need it to fund the schools. So there's a legal limit on how much money a charity can retain each year, is there?
I think what they do is you set it out in your objectives, the charity objectives and your goals, and you put a limit on what kind of money you need to be sat there. The rest of it you need to spend. And currently this trust is well over their limit. But they're not the only ones. There's other brethren charities in exactly the same situation.
So if you get too much money, you just set up another parallel charity and put half of it into that and keep, collecting together as many pots as you can to contain all the oil.
So it goes on to say, ordinary brethren, individuals, and businesses are strongly encouraged to spend their money with companies run by the church leaders, such as consulting firm Universal Business Team, known as UBT. Documents produced for a recent Strive forum to advertise these projects to the PBCC's flock say UBT turns over up to $500 million a year. The profits, according to the documents, are invested in 124 Plymouth Brethren schools and other charities, such as public-facing charity, the Rapid Relief Team. But one insider, speaking on condition of for his own safety, said the commercial enterprises appeared to make considerably more money than was distributed to the charities. I think the tax office will be looking at where all the money actually goes. The insider said UBT charges Brethren businesses between $30,000 and $150,000 for 2 hours of consulting. But most of the consultants are working for free, thinking they're doing it for the testimony of Bruce Hales, meaning the gross profits of the business were about 80%. That's a lot to unpack right there. Crazy.
And if you have a Hales as a consultant, then yeah, we're looking to.
Oh, you froze, love. Yeah, what do you have to say on that, Damian?
It does back up exactly what I'm saying, is that you've got these chains of
anonymity
moving around this ecosystem, and though the accounts look genuine, it's how do they control where that money's going? And if you just look at one individual part of it, look at Rapid Relief Team, is there anything obvious there? Probably not. You look at UBT, is there anything obvious there? Probably not. But actually, if you look how they all link together, and that's what I think the Australian Tax Office will be doing, is actually, hold on, let's look at this as a whole. And to me, I don't imagine this investigation and the outcome of this will be particularly quick, because they will have gathered an awful lot of information. But if there's any holes in that, I'm absolutely sure that the tax office will find them.
Yeah. And I think that's why they need to look at it as a whole, because then it also, that whole broad overview that they need to do will then extend outside of Australia. We know that it heads into all the other different countries.
Sorry, I cut out. So if you want Hales, one of the Hales boys is a consultant, which they call a blue skies consultant. You're looking more into the region of the latter end of those two figures that are on there. And for speeches at, say, a seminar or a webinar or whatever they want to do, most of the brethren are under the impression that the Hales boys are giving up their time for the testimony to prosper the brethren's businesses. But no, actually, they're charging a significant amount of money towards the higher amount of those two figures on the screen. For one speech.
Yeah. And you know what? It does come back to the way that they have their insiders viewing the hierarchy up top, right? I mean, we've got the way that Bruce Hales comes into meetings hours late, comes in with security guards. He's flying on private jets. The way that they display the top shows and proves to everybody below it that these are men to be revered. These are men to be honored. This is the way that this should be. And you should feel lucky, again, in this case, to pay $150,000 an hour to have them come in and consult with your business.
Yeah. Well, they've designed it to look that way, haven't they?
Exactly. Yeah.
They're, bringing sort of blacked out motorcades in to think that they're someone of significant importance. And they're all fooled. And, they call us the most horrific names, or back at you, because you're all fooled by someone that's nothing but really a bit of a con artist. Because he is nobody. He is nobody. Yes, he's rich. He's got, X, Y, and Z to his name in financial terms. But who is he actually? No one gives a shit about him.
Yeah. Going on into the article, it says, in the recent Strive Forum, the ecosystem's purpose was said to be striving towards securing our financial future so we can fund our way of life indefinitely. UBT, whose offices were raided, is described in the documents as our parent company. Our leadership team comprises members of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church and professionals from the wider community, the documents say. It is also the central company from which members rent phones and computers. These are fitted with Brethren-approved software, including a program called Streamline 3, which means UBT administrators can monitor the browsing history and GPS locations of Brethren members and remotely capture images of their screen. So we've talked a lot about this on our podcast of Streamline 3. This is a picture, an actual photo of a Streamline 3 phone. Literally saying location can be accessed. Your IT admin is allowing Streamline 3 to access your location.
On that screen, there's no SIM inside it. If you scroll down to the picture of it, it says there's no SIM, yet it's still So if you see at the bottom, it says no SIM, emergency calls only.
So right here.
Yeah, it's still got the tracking software being operated.
Yeah.
One example I found is where there is holes between, I've talked previously about holes between one set of accounts reported and another set of accounts where you can't see, you can see the money's coming on one but not gone out of the other. What we've got with the Vision Investment Fund and Rapid Relief Team in the UK, there was a company set up in Peterhead, by the Peterhead family, the Rabies. The company was set up in 2018 called Nuvik UK Limited. So at the time that company was formed, the Rabies took a 90% share in it. But interestingly, the other 10% was owned by a Rapid Relief Team Trading Limited. And what that is, Rapid Relief Trading Limited was also set up in 2018 as the trading arm in the UK of the Rapid Relief Team charity. So most charities, to protect the charity, if they're doing any commerce, will set up a trading arm. So it's a bit like if you see a charity shop on a high street, that charity shop will generally not be it'll be part of a trading team, not directly responsible, not directly into the charity. So the charity will own the trading team, but it gives them a level of protection. So what I found interesting is you can see on the Nuvik UK accounts over its first 3 years, you can see the 10% shareholding. You can see that there was a level of investment had come into that business. However, when you go and look at the Rapid Relief Trading Limited accounts and the Rapid Relief Team charity, there's no report for the first 3 years of that investment. So as a charity, they should be reporting what they've invested. Then there is a discrepancy between Nuvik saying they received 200K's worth of investment. But according to the Rapid Relief Team trading account, when they actually updated their accounts 3 years later, it said they'd invested 40,000. It looks to me like that's 200K that was invested, not 40K. But then the story doesn't finish there, because the Rabies have bought out that investment. They've paid back their investors. And that's quite clear in the charity accounts for the Rapid Relief Team and for Rapid Relief Trading Limited. What you can see there is that they received just over £400,000 back. So it looks a really good investment if you're the Rapid Relief Team. You've invested 40K, according to your accounts, and you've got a return of 400K. I would question that. I think it's 200K that they invested and they got a return of 400. Still a great investment over a 3-4 year period. It's then that there's a final bit to it. Why is there a difference in the accounts between the business and the charity? But there's a final bit. In 2019, a year after the Nuvik UK was set up, it took on another investment for 40% of Nuvik Global Limited. And that investment came from the Vision Investment Fund. So again, very messy, very complex. Brethren Charity investing, the trading arm investing, the Brethren Investment Fund investing. What is clear, though, is that I can see at the end of all that is that the Rabies have paid back that investment. Nuvik's a high turnover company already into, you're only talking about 20 odd million a year turnover sales. So that business in 6 years, 5 years, because the figures would have probably been, would be 2022 accounts that I would be looking at. So in the space of 5 years, they had a business doing nothing to a business turning over 20 odd million dollars a year, driven by investment from the trading arm of the Rapid Relief Team, charity, Rabies money, and this Vision Investment Fund. What I would question is that the Vision Investment Fund ended up getting more dollars per share when they recuperated the money than the charity did, which seems odd. To me, why would an investment fund get more money than the charity did? Added in the final conflict of interest, and that is across a lot of what we talked about, a lot around UBT, OneSchool Global, the Brethren Companies, Campus & Co, Rapid Relief Team, is the massive conflict of interest, as in family members, relatives, sometimes the same person, working for a Brethren company, owning a Brethren company, and being a high-profile member of the UBT or of OSG. So there's a whole conflict of interest. And in this particular example with Nuvik and our team, Edward Raby, one of the shareholders of Nuvik and Raby family in Peterhead, also is the Rapid Relief Team leader in that part of the country. So how did that investment come about? In a company, because Rapid Relief Trading Limited set up with a 400,000 Aussie dollars investment, 200k roughly of UK. So they got that money. Why? That money had to have gone into Nuvik.
Wow.
So all these conflicts and these circles of different businesses, all interrelated, with interrelated family members, relatives, brethren members, all coming under the one circle. I can see why the Australian Tax Office have had to, when you take it all as a whole, there is gaps in accounts where it's reported one side, but not reported on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really is very interesting because it shows why it was the precinct in Australia that was raided, because that's where everything comes together.
Yeah.
All the tentacles of the octopus converge on its brain, and the brain is the precinct. The only possible way of unraveling this web is to start right at the center, work outwards, and that appears to be what's happening. Do you think, Damian?
Well, that was Damian had to skip out, but that was a very potent statement that he ended that with. And I think that wraps up everything that we've been thinking, is that there's a reason why ATO went straight to the Sydney precinct and is able to do what they're doing, and why it's taken so long for them to get to where they're doing it. But I do believe, and I mean, Richard, you can confirm on this, but I do believe that this is the first of many investigations into the money inside the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. As much as they say that it's not involved, they're not involved in it. We know, all of us know, that it is 100% a factor within the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. To me, in my opinion, this church is being run as a business. It is not anything else besides that.
Yeah, I think Damian summed it up nicely in saying, it's not that the church owns UBT, it's that UBT owns the church.
Yeah, exactly.
And UBT is owned by the Hales family.
Yeah.
And the ATO has gone right into the brain of the octopus, and they're going to be following the tentacles down all the way to the individual members. You might call them the suckers, if you like. So that's what's going to be happening over the next few months. Watch this space.
Absolutely. And the link to the article will be below in the description. So go ahead and open that up and read it. So to bring this podcast to a close, we're going to release another photo from a recent fellowship meeting. We apologize to anyone that finds this photo triggering, but want you to notice the overcrowding. This picture is at the end of a meeting when Bruce stands up to leave. This is the ritual at the end of a special service with their man of God, in which all members simultaneously stand to attention as the man of God leaves the church. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thanks for Damian coming on. Thanks to Abby. Thank you, Richard. And to the Anonymous and our Insider. Thank you all so very, very much. Much love to everyone. Take care. How can you support Get a Life podcast? You can donate internationally via PayPal at www.paypal.me/getalifepodcast. PayPal also has a QR code that can be scanned. Or donate to our Get a Life podcast GoFundMe. If you're in a high-demand religious group and need help, please go to oliveleaf.network. To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me. Check out www.get-a-life.net for Get a Life merchandise, books, and ways to support or get support. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to Get a Life, and comment.